There are just 3 games remaining in the regular season before we can finally turn the page on this dreadful Sixers season and beginning to look to build to next year. However, there are some positive storylines in these fateful couple games, with Lonnie Walker recently emerging with a 29-point performance, his most since the 2022 season, to cement his outlook on this Sixers team. I want to talk specifically about Lonnie, why this is an important stretch for him to have something to build off, as well as talk about some of these other notable names, these diamonds in the rough that these Sixers have stumbled onto, guys that we likely did not even know their name a couple months ago and are suiting up for this Sixers team. I'm talking to you, Philip Wheeler. I'm talking to you, Colin Castleton, although you were solid as Florida as well. But I do want to start with Lonnie Walker directly here. And of course, we kind of knew the situation with Lonnie, who started off his season playing in Lithuania in the EuroLeague, that he was on a contract for the tail end of the season as well as a club option for next year. This essentially was an extended tryout for Walker, and we all know this is a guy who has NBA potential. To kind of highlight, or NBA ability, I should say, as this man has proved it before. The 26-year-old on the season, averaging 10.6 points, 3.1 rebounds, 2.6 per game, 2.6 assists per game, shooting 41.8% from three and 33.7% from beyond the three-point arc. Now, I am a Lonnie Walker guy in general. I'm a guy who went to college up in Reading, where he is from, and is rep quite heavily up there. I will add, have been rooting for the guy, but I will admit, it was a little frustrating and concerning, the first stretch of play that we did see from Lonnie. Now, in fairness to him, this is a difficult situation to walk in as a new face in this organization when the season is entirely off the rails already. And on top of that, catching up to NBA speed, playing a different style of basketball than what he was accustomed to at the EuroLeague, it is totally understandable, and that doesn't even bring up the concussion he sustained, some of the injuries that he battled. And I did want to highlight this quote right here from Lonnie, which I think highlights a little bit of his headspace and his outlook, and it's coming from PHLY Sixers, that says Lonnie Walker talks about dealing with the concussion, which caused him to miss 7 games. Quote, I try not to be upset about the outcome of things that I can't control. Quote, just using that time to continuously get better. If it's watching film, talking to the coaches, talking to other players, learning about the plays more, what I can do to provide more for the team. And I do love this outlook from Lonnie specifically here. And of course, that brings us to our performance last night. So to kind of highlight the full box score of this team, it was once again the 12th consecutive loss for the Sixers team on the season, a 117-105 loss at the hands of the Miami Heat. One of the more watchable losses for the Sixers team. There have been plenty in this stretch that has felt like watching G League basketball or college basketball. This felt like an NBA game watching. The Sixers were in it from almost start to finish. They were outscored 34-22 in the fourth quarter to cement it, but the stars of the show were Quentin Grimes, as usual, and Lonnie Walker, adding 29 points, each of them there. Lonnie specifically shot 6 of 13 from 3, 10 of 18 from the field, added 2 assists and a rebound there, and this shot creation is something that is very welcomed on this Sixers team. Now, for Lonnie specifically, I don't think there was much doubt about this guy being around for the long haul, or at least for next season, by meaning the long haul there. I'm sure that this guy will latch on to some sort of long-term NBA deal at this point. It doesn't make any sense to me why this guy was out of the league in the first place. He did try his hand starting out this season with the Boston Celtics in training camp on an Exhibit 10 deal. That ultimately did not work out, as the Celtics elected it was not worth the luxury tax implications to keep him on roster. That led his pathway to going overseas and landed him back here in Philadelphia, which I think we might end up being quite thankful for in the long haul. Now, as far as Lonnie as a whole, I did want to shift this to the entire picture for the Sixers team. Now, obviously, when talking about these bottom of the roster guys, none of this truly matters if the top 3 aren't at least there to some extent. If they cannot connect some semblance of games played together, that means Tyrese Maxey, that means Paul George, and that means Joel Embiid. The 3 max contracts, unfortunately, we don't have very much new information to work with. At this point, we have not even seen an official announcement that Joel Embiid has got that surgery that we talked about. I've already been pretty open about my kind of skepticism or pessimism that this surgery will be what fixes his knee there. I will say, from the Paul George conversation, I do think we'll get a better season from Paul George next year. I don't think it is going to be the max contract version of him, the all-star version of him that has existed for over a decade on the NBA to this point, but I don't think it'll be quite as bad as what we saw this year. Beyond that, the roster is a blank canvas. And yes, there are guys like Jared McCain who are immediately going to provide a punch to this team that was drastically missing through the larger part of the season, but the rest of the roster still sort of up for grabs. And that is why I did want to shift in to the contract conversation with a lot of these names. This will be a more pressing topic of conversation now that we do extend into the offseason. Finally, there are 3 games remaining that we just got to limp to the finish line, and taking a look at the commitments for next year, there is not a ton on the Sixers roster. Kelly Oubre with a player option, which is notable there as he controls his destiny. The same situation with Andre Drummond. I will say I'm much more positive to Kelly Oubre Jr. than I would probably say the consensus here. My gut feeling is that both these guys do ultimately opt into their contracts and remain with the Sixers next year. Kelly, I think there's a more likely chance than Andre that they do opt out. I think there's zero chance that Andre Drummond could fetch $5 million in the open market. I do think there is a somewhat chance that Oubre could get maybe not a pay raise, but in the same grand scheme or grand, general ballpark of what he would be paid if he does seek a different destination. But I do think Oubre likes playing in Philly. I do think this is a guy who he's played more meaningful basketball for this Sixers team this season, obviously to the side, which does seem to mean something to him. Quentin Grimes, we've had this conversation here. I think it is more or less a lock that Quentin Grimes is back to Sixers uniform next year. The cost will be an interesting factor there. I don't think the Brooklyn Nets are really the only team I'm talking about here. There's going to be a team that gives this insane offer to ultimately lure him. Could happen, and I'm not entirely ruling that off the table, but more likely than not, I do think that Quentin Grimes is back, and the restricted free agent as well free agency tag, as well as the Sixers carrying his bird rights, are really advantageous to their chances of keeping them. Then, of course, there's Jared McCain, who I do think people have forgotten just how talented he was. Just brought an absolute punch to the Sixers team, and I'm very excited looking forward to next year, that even with kind of my preface about the top three, the guys that we're confident in, Tyrese Maxey, we know that he is going to be back with a vengeance next year, that there's no doubt about him from a personality or talent level. I'm really excited to see the things that he can do sharing the court with Jared McCain for a more extended period of time. The way that the threat of these guys' shots open up the drive, the way that both of them move off ball, and McCain specifically, I think is even more advanced in his read of the game, his feeling for off ball motion, how to create his shot without having the ball in his hands. He has embraced the Steph Curry style of basketball in a way that I haven't really seen a young player do yet. Yes, we have guys like Trae Young who are willing to shoot from well beyond the three-point arc or pull up at half court there, but I haven't seen a player embrace the off-ball motion or the commitment to movement the way Jared McCain has in the same way that Steph Curry has. So very excited about that there. Then Eric Gordon, kind of crazy that he is on a player option here. I can't believe that was negotiated in the contract. I have no clue what the going rate for Eric Gordon. I would be shocked if there's anything above veteran's minimum available to him at this stage of the career. Also would not entirely shock me if he just walks away at the tail end of the season. So we're going to kind of brush past that one there. Kyle Lowry cannot be back under any circumstance. I kind of respect that he is taking the floor and playing a little bit in these final stretch of games. This is certainly not the ride-off into the sunset season that I'm sure he envisioned. I would have no problem if he steps right across the white line and joins the coaching staff next year, but I think we have seen enough of the Kyle Lowry experience. Gershon Yabusele, tough conversation to kind of answer right now. A lot of this is going to be dependent on the full cap situation. I'm pretty positive. I'm more optimistic, I would say, than most that Yabusele is back. I think a lot of times when we talk about these Sixers players, we do sort of overrate their market to an extent. And to be completely neutral here about Gershon, he has faded down the second half of the season. There was a stretch at the start of the year that Yabusele looked like the third or fourth best player on the Sixers team. That we're talking about him commanding some massive money in free agency. Well, we now have a full sample size of a season, and he did run out of a little bit of gas, and there are some limitations in his game. I'm not saying I don't want Yabusele back by any means, but I do think that the price range that we were talking about at the beginning of the season is a little far-fetched at this point. That if we are talking about a taxpayer mid-level exception or something along those lines, right in the $5 million ballpark, I kind of think that is on the table for Yabusele at this point. And again, when looking around the league, there is just not that much cap space out there. The other factor to certainly include here, it is the Sixers draft pick. That is going to decide the decision-making process in a major way. Your outlook for wanting to keep Yabusele certainly changes if you have Cooper Flagg or Derek Queen or Ace Bailey or a guy like that you can believe be a plug-and-play impact player compared to a guy that you might have to do some cap manipulations to even retain in the first place. So we'll see on the Yabusele conversation. I've seen a lot of skepticism in the Twitter circles and online. I don't agree with a lot of that, and I do think that there's a more likely chance that he's in a Sixers uniform than not next year, but a lot of it is going to depend on where that draft pick shakes out there. Now, to continue plugging down the list, we get to Ricky Council IV, who unfortunately, I don't see the vision anymore. I think one of my unfortunate realizations of this season is Ricky Council IV is just not an NBA player. And to kind of reflect on what he's done from a season-long standpoint, We're talking about 7.2 points per game, 2.8 rebounds, 1.3 assists, shooting 38.8% from the field and 26.3% from three. That just can't happen. You can't be shooting below 40% from the field or below 30% from three as a guard or a wing in the NBA, and that's what we're seeing from Ricky. And for him specifically, what is maddening to me is he should be thriving in this madness. This type of season should be where he can showcase exactly what he can do, what he wants to do as a basketball player, and he's lost it. He's been a coach's decision, does not play these past couple games. He suited up for just 2 minutes the other night, and Nick Nurse basically confirmed post-game that he planned on him being a healthy scratch. Ultimately, Justin Edwards did suffer a bit of an ankle injury, and that's the only reason we saw Ricky play. Now, to reflect on his contract, it is a value contract here, and I see plenty of driving force or belief that he will stick around because of that reason there, that we're talking about a non-guaranteed contract next season, and then a team option the following year, each for under $3 million. That is great value, but it's only great value if the guy can play, and I'm kind of at that point with Ricky that I do think it is time to pull the plug there. We will see if it happens, and I know that Morey values the value at a high level there, so we'll see if he ends up holding on to it because of this, but I'm kind of done with the Ricky Counts of the experiment, and I do think the Sixers would be much wiser to prioritize getting 15 playable NBA players rather than guys that are a hope and a prayer, as I think Ricky fully fits in that category. And I directly contrast him with a guy like Justin Edwards, because to me, they are the antithesis of each other as players. A guy like Justin Edwards is going to play completely within his box, know exactly what he brings to the table and his role on the team. This is a guy who has made the most of the situation this year. To contrast that with Ricky, he has no clue what box he fits in or really any interest in playing inside those boxes. He's taking the most bizarre, crazy, one-legged step-back threes on an every night basis. That's what we see from him when he's on the court. That is his shot selection, and he does not have the instincts as a passer. He is not a high-level rebounder. I've kind of run out of, I hate to turn this into a full Ricky Council rant, but I'm over the experience at this point, and that has unfortunately been one of my larger realizations this second half of the year. To kind of speed through a couple at the bottom here, Adem Bona has absolutely earned his stripes here, is a guy that will be in play as the primary backup center option next year. I would think that there's another guy around, and Drummond certainly could be that name there, but I mean, he's earned it with his play, and that's a guy that I think is great for him to be getting real NBA reps on the second half of the season. Lonnie Walker, we talked in plenty of. Justin Edwards, nothing but glowing reports from me. Jared Butler, I do think sticks around on that team option there, a guy that I think is totally competent and will be really effective running a second or third unit from a backup perspective. And then we get to some of the names that I think are less likely to stick around. Colin Castleton, wouldn't have any issue with him being around this team next year. He's totally competent. He's honestly been above my expectations since he's come. I watched him play in Summer League for the Lakers when I went out there in Vegas this year, and he was a guy that caught my eye right away. I was impressed with how NBA ready he felt. Do remember him from his days as Florida as well. Beyond that, don't have a ton of optimism here. Marcus Bagley, I don't quite see the vision there. He's been better than I expected, but I've never really liked his game since college. Jeff Doughton is out of two-way years or opportunities there, so it's going to be a standard NBA deal or bust there. It's a tough spot to be in for him, and I do think this is likely the end of the line there. We'll see what happens with the Kyle Lowry situation as well. Jalen Hood-Schifino, he has his moments. He has his flashes. He certainly possesses the pedigree, but there is just a little something missing in his game, I feel. Don't really feel the need for him to be back, but wouldn't have an issue with it either. And then Alex Reese already locked up on the 2-year, two-way contract there. So well done by Daryl Morey with that. But for this current time, with 3 games remaining, it is on each of these guys to give their final pitch, their final example for why they deserve to continue being a part of the Sixers franchise, or their trial for all other 29 teams in the league if you want straight out of Philadelphia, which I don't blame any of these guys based on how the season has gone. But that is where my head is at this current time. Do want to give one more shout out to Lonnie Walker once again for how he performed last night and finally seeing a little bit of what he can fully bring to the table. The 29-point performance, the most since 2022 at the NBA level, and I do hope this is just the start. So hopefully he can close with a little momentum to build into next year. That is a guy that I certainly have penciled in as some guard depth on this roster next year, but we will see how things shake out from there. But do want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with, which of those names jump out to you from a future roster building perspective. As always, make sure you guys are smash that subscribe button, dropping a like on this video here. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.